Hello everyone, good morning from Caracas. For teleSUR, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. Thanks for joining us on From the South. To begin today, we go to the United States. That's where Venezuelan human rights officials ratified their guarantee of human rights before the Organization of American States. Our correspondent in D.C. now, Bianca Perez, with those details.
The Executive Secretary of the National Council on Human Rights in Venezuela reported on the advances made on this subject in the country.
Venezuela now has a constitution approved by popular referendum, taking human rights as a cornerstone, greatly exceeding existing standards of the time and being an example for the whole world in this matter.
The majority of member states of the Permanent Council congratulated the consolidation of citizens' power in Venezuela for the protection of universal rights.
We welcome the report of Venezuela's Executive Secretary on human rights to our session, and we hope that this will open the way for more active engagement by autonomous national human rights institutions in our deliberations.
At the same time, at the IACHR, a hearing took place with the families of members of the opposition, Leopoldo Lopez and Daniel Ceballos, supported by the U.S.
On September 10th, a judge convicted and sentenced opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez to nearly 14 years in prison. We repeat our calls for Mr. Lopez's release and for the release of all Venezuelans who are imprisoned for political reasons.
Venezuela rejected this viewpoint, assuring that a terrorist is not the equivalent of a member of the opposition.
We have 43, our 43, and that is why this man is in prison. These deaths happen due to violence caused by the operation called La Salida. Light the streets on fire, 43 deaths.
According to the Permanent Mission of Venezuela, the IACHR once again has a clear objective.
The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights supported the coup on April 11, 2002. Is paid by the U.S. government.
Venezuela criticized the IACHR for only listening to the families of the opposition and not hearing the voices of the families of the 43 people killed in 2014. Bianca Perez, teleSUR, Washington, D.C.
We'll go to Mexico now. The country has been condemned for its grave human rights record, but this hasn't stopped military forces from continuing to violate the rights of people. They raided various communities, claiming they have fugitive drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman cornered, but they have been saying this now for a week. In the meantime, hundreds of people have fled their homes after being shot at by Mexican Marines who claim they were attacked. This has been denied by various residents who are demanding the military leave their communities.
The Marines are good for nothing because they enter homes and mess about for no reason. They have no rights. They kill innocent people who are not to blame for anything. People had to flee through the woods, and that is very bad.
In less than 2 years, 19 journalists have been killed in one of the world's most dangerous and violent countries. I'm talking about Honduras. Threats against journalists have tripled there as well. Our correspondent Gerardo Torres now with more on the danger of being a journalist in Honduras.
The Committee for the Freedom of Speech keeps records in Honduras on the attacks against journalists and have reported that attacks are increasing.
We have registered 3 times the amount in comparison with 2014. And of course, in comparison with other years, there has been an increase every year in the aggressions that people suffer when all they want is freedom of speech. In 22 months, we have seen 19 assassinations of journalists in the country, and since 2003, we have registered 60 murdered.
Ricardo Elner is a Honduran journalist that works for international media. He has been critical of the government and has even been removed from the presidential house. This past Tuesday, he was threatened and will denounce this to the Human Rights Committee.
I was arriving for a coffee and 2 motorcycles stopped beside me and 2 men threatened me. You son of a bitch, you talk too much. We are going to cut your tongue off. I think that is a threat that I have to denounce. The situation for journalism in Honduras is difficult every day. It's more complicated. There is more repression against journalists and any communicators.
Ernest is one of many Honduran journalists that continue to be threatened while trying to do their job. This year, the National Congress approved a protection for journalists law, but this hasn't changed the dangerous reality and has proven to be just a propaganda display. Gerardo Torres, telesur, Central America.
Also in Central America, Guatemala's former First Lady, Sandra Torres, says she feels confident she will win this Sunday's elections despite the fact that comedian-turned-politician Jimmy Morales is leading in the polls. Now, Torres has been criticized for divorcing her presidential husband only to run for office. Now, the election comes after the arrest of the top-level officials for corruption, including the now former president, Otto Pérez Molina, and former vice president, Roxana Valdetti. Now, surveys show Morales will win with over 58% of the vote.
In the next period as a candidate. Obviously, the Constitutional Court announced a resolution where she was not allowed to participate. Now, she doesn't have any impediments.
And now we take a quick look at some of the other stories making the news around the world.
NASA said Los Angeles will experience a serious earthquake in a few years. A study by the Aerospace Agency says the chance of this happening is 99.9%. NASA said the chances of the quake being of magnitude 5.0 or greater is 99%. They said there's a 35% chance the earthquake will be greater than 6.3 magnitude. Israeli police violence against Palestinians continues. They shot 2 more Palestinians claiming they stabbed a resident. Israeli forces have killed at least 48 Palestinians this month, including various children, while injuring hundreds. The Israeli aggressions will be the focus of talks shortly between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The UN has attempted to mediate between Palestine and Israel, but Palestinians question international authorities, saying they are biased in favor of Israel.
It is Israel that is putting itself above international law. And I think Mr. Kerry should be told that it's time for the United States and other countries to stop treating Israel as impunitive to international law, to tell Israel enough is enough. It's time to end settlement activities, and it's time to end the Israeli occupation of Palestine.
The UN body in charge of refugees said they are having a rough time dealing with the flow of about 4,500 refugees into Europe daily. The European Union has said they will require close to $9 million to face the crisis. And as cold sets in, the UN scrambles to make sure all the refugees have tents, blankets, meals, and water. In Slovenia, over 10,000 Syrians arrived in the last 24 hours. The EU expects that by year's end, they will have received about 1 million people fleeing violence and poverty in the Middle East and Africa.
The situation is really difficult. Children are staying in the cold. People have been waiting here for the past 2 days. All night they sleep outside. Children are getting sick. It is enough.
At least 56 people have died in the Philippines in the wake of the typhoon Kopu. The Category 4 cyclone has sent devastating rains and winds across the country. In many, residents struggle to cope with the flooding. The typhoon has left a trail of destruction in the northeastern region of the country, destroying homes, crops, and affecting nearly 1 million people.
A look at sports now in the United States. The New York Mets swept the Chicago Cubs, quelling their hopes of their first World Series title since 1908. Now for the Mets, this will be their first World Series since 2000. The New York squad clinched the National League Championship Series in 4 games. They took an early 6-0 lead from which the Windy City team could never recover. Now the Toronto Blue Jays and the Kansas City Royals extended their series to a 6th game. They are now 3-2 in the American Championship Series. Oh well, I was rooting for the Cubs. They almost never win. I always like to root for an underdog, but I guess it'll be the Mets this year from that league. That's what we're covering today. Plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For teleSUR English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day.